Anybody tell me what two hotels are the only two hotels to have something in common that no other hotel in Jermyn would have had? Two hotels and what they would have in common that no other hotel in Jermyn had. Are there any guesses?
One was the Windsor?
Well, yes, it was. One of them was the Windsor, but that's not what the answer is going to be. What do they have in common?
Oh, what do they have in common?
But the Windsor is one of them.
Did they burn?
There's a lot of them that burned. We have no takers, no guesses.
One was the Clemens.
No.
The state troopers.
No. No, I don't think anybody's going to get it, so I'm going to reveal it. The Windsor, which was not the Windsor, it was the Farmers Hotel, and the St. George Hotel. One thing that they have in common that no other hotel had was they existed in Jermyn, Gibsonburg, and Rushdale. The three names of the town was before Baconville or after Baconville. We didn't have any hotels in Baconville that I can find. But St. George Hotel and the Windsor, which was Farmers Hotel, were built in the time of Rushdale, and they existed through the period of Gibsonburg, and they were still there when it became Jermyn. So there are three different names of the towns. They existed through those three. So they're the only two hotels, and one of them still exists, which is the Windsor. And the other thing that I have here is the Historical Society as a whole, without most of the members knowing it, has agreed to make a donation for a card for Cody for his new baby. Now we're going to start with hotels, and I originally, when I started this,
You want some lights up?
yeah, we can shut the lights off. No, it'll make it easier to see this, at least on that side. Okay, we're gonna go through the hotels, halls, and bars that were in Jermyn. Originally, I was thinking we're gonna find about 12 to 14 hotels in Jermyn. Jermyn had doubled the size of the population that we have now. There's over 4,000 people in Jermyn during the big heyday of the mines. And I actually found some of them are not duplicate hotels but duplicate owners, but I can't prove because all the information that we have just says that it was a hotel, and it doesn't say anything other than Main Street, A Street, B Street, or where it was. It doesn't say what the name of the hotel was before. So we have to do a lot more research through the public to find out. But this picture that's here and the next picture that you'll see, if anybody has any idea on what you're looking at or what you could be looking at, that one would be either or of those two, and we're not completely sure, would be the very first inn or hotel or rooming house that was in Jermyn. That is, if you're going up to the ramp to the Casey Highway on the left or on the right of the road where the Rushbrook Creek goes into the Lackawanna River. It was stated that Christopher E. Wilbur, who was the very first settler in Jermyn, had what was called the 4 Mile Inn, not the 4 Mile Hotel, but the 4 Mile Inn. But he had a boarding room in his house that he let people stay at while they were trapping, hunting, traveling up the valley from Scranton, Peckville, to Carbondale. Now, Christopher E. Wilbur was the person that helped the Wirtz brothers find coal in the Upper Valley. Now, this is just a picture of where it could be. What I'm going to do is I'm going to try to set up in the next couple of weeks before they start the bridge project in Jermyn. I'm going to try to set up a day on a Saturday where we can go down and along the river on both sides and scratch around a little bit with some metal detectors and shovels and look for some crocks or bottles and see if we can find anything that would give us a clue on where and which side of the creek it was on. But all the information that's been given to us in the newspapers tells us that Christopher Wilbur had his inn on the east side of the road from Peckville to Carbondale, which is not the main street, but a road that went along the edge of the river. So this is the best indication that we have of where the first inn or hotel would have been in Jermyn. All right, the second and really the first hotel was built by Louis Pizer. If you go to the next slide, I don't know if that's going to give it to us or not. No, that's it, but leave that there. Leave that, it'll stay up there. The next hotel was built by Louis Pizer. And Louis Pizer lived right where Kevin Pittak lives now on Main Street, right next to Vitucci's landscaping business on Main Street. That was Louis Pizer's house where Kevin Pittak lives now. Where Vitucci's was where the St. George Hotel was. But he built in 1866 the very first hotel in Jermyn, and it was one block to the west of the St. George Hotel, which would put it on Madison Avenue, right around where Floyd lives, somewhere on that section of the block. And it doesn't say which side of the street, but one side or the other of Madison Avenue in that 500 block of Madison Avenue was the 4 Mile Hotel. It was called the 4 Mile Hotel. So Louis Pizer was the first builder of a hotel. That same year, in 1866, John Nicholson built what it was known then as the Farmers Hotel. So the Farmers Hotel was built on the corner of Rushbrook Street and Main Street, which is this is the location where the Windsor is. That was called the Farmers Hotel in 1866. It was later owned by a Smith. Then it was owned by George Edmonds and Levi Snyder. Dick Milheisen's mother and family owned it. And we have pictures up here of his mother in a baby carriage in front of it with a horse in front of it when it had a tiny little porch on it. It had 3 stories. We'll show some more pictures as we go, and I'm hoping that it'll come up when I get to them. But I'm showing you locations now that are pictures that I took. And these windows stuck out on the sides. And there was an extra floor on top, and then a roof on top of that. So it was almost 4 stories high. You'll see that in the pictures down here, and you'll see it, and I think I have pictures of these pictures on the slides. But there were basement windows in there, and Andy can verify this. There was basement windows in there, and you could actually look out those windows and see the road. But now the road has been raised up, so you don't see that anymore. But it was owned by a whole bunch of people over the course of the years. Now Gary Yarnowski runs that now, and a fellow from Peckville owns it. Before that, Andy Widiak and Paul Widiak owned it. Keith Morcom owned it. Joe Maratska owned it. Joe Maratska lived right behind me, him and Viola Maratska. They owned it when the top floor burnt in 1963. The top floor burned right off that in 1963. It was also called the Bluebird Hotel, and a Mrs. Alt was the manager, but it doesn't say who the owner was during that period. And that I have a complete history of that, so we'll go to the next slide and see what shows up, because I don't know what order I put them in. Okay, you'll see these columns in front of it now. These columns were indeed in front of it all the way back. Let's see if I can pull it up. They were in front of it during 1918 when the people came back from World War I, because they had a welcome back parade for World War I in 1918. So those columns were there in 1918. The original porch was only about maybe from here to here, and that was the original porch that was up there. That would have been in the 1800s when it was first called the Windsor Inn, because it was Farmers Hotel all the way through from 1866. It was built in Rushdale, so all the way through Rushdale. In fact, there was a murder in 1867 on Main Street. It's called the famous Rushdale homicide in the newspapers, and it had happened right in front of Oliver Morgan's house. Oliver Morgan was one of the first people on council in Jermyn in 1870 when the town was formed. But he lived right about where Terry Williams lives and Mrs. Williams, right next to Loretta's kitty shop on Main Street. And a lot of people are nodding their head that are old enough to know that, and I think everybody here that lives in town is old enough, but if you're from out of town, you'll see it's a vacant store now on Main Street in the 600 block. But that had just two columns, no columns underneath, but it had an overhang, and there was a small little porch up on top. But it was the Farmers Hotel then, and then it didn't become the Windsor until later. Let's see if I think I have the date on here. Let's see, 1963 was the fire, and I don't think I have that on here when it became the Windsor, but I think I have it in some of my notes later on, so maybe we'll find it later. But John Nicholson built it, 1866, as the Farmers Hotel. One of the highlights of that Farmers Hotel was John Mitchell. And if you're familiar with history, John Mitchell was the man that really pushed the union for the miners. And his statue is at the courthouse in Scranton. John Mitchell stood on that porch, right there what you see, and he gave a great speech to the miners about being in the union. And my connection to that is my grandfather was a union representative for the mines. He worked in the mines, and he was arrested in Carbondale for, I guess, causing trouble when the miners were striking up in Carbondale. So I do have a connection to the mines and Mitchells and the union. So that was through my grandfather. Okay. Now this Richard Auto Sales is directly across from the Windsor. That was a gas station for as long as anybody in Jermyn has known it that's alive. I don't know, Dick, you're probably the oldest one here. Do you remember anything other than a gas station being there?
No.
Okay, well, that is the exact spot of what was called Sweeney's Hotel. It was built by Eben Roberts in 1870, the year that Jermyn became a town, officially a borough. So that point right there was the site of the Sweeney Hotel. It was later owned by Ira Westcott in 1880. It burned February 10th, 1902. At that time it was being leased by a James John, and it was owned by Tennant. The last name is Tennant, T-E-N-N-E-T, and Beebe, B-E-E-B-E. They were the owners of the building when it burned, but it was leased by James John. Directly behind that was a shed or a small barn, and that was the site of the unknown third fire company in Jermyn. I don't know, unless you were a member of the historical site and heard me talk about this before, you would not know that we had 3 fire companies in Jermyn. Way back in the 1800s, The Crystal Fire Company was formed as the first fire company. The second fire company was the Artesians, because they felt we needed a fire company closer down to the southern part of town where the powder mill was, where the big explosions were. So we had the Artesian Fire Company. And the people that lived up where I live in the northern part of the town, which is Rushbrook area to Mayfield, didn't have a fire company. So a businessman named J.D. Stocker decided that he would put up the money to start a third fire company. So it was called the J.D. Stocker Hose Company. And right behind this building, which is where we're going to go dig for bottles to look for anything that might have came out of Sweeney's Hotel and the Christopher Wilbur place. That's all along that creek in the back before it gets into the river. That's where there was a hose cart in a little shed, and it was the J.D. Stocker Hose Company. They never built a building, and they disbanded not too long after that once they started buying fire trucks, because all they had was hose carts. All three fire companies had a hand-pulled hose cart, and that's all they had. So that was the site of Sweeney Hotel and the Stocker, J.D. Stocker Hose Company. All right, next slide should get me to the next one. This empty lot here, this is, it's easy for me to know where it is, but if you don't recognize this, that's the White Elephant. The building across from the Windsor going up Rushbrook Street, that's the empty lot. Now this empty lot is where this picture is, and it'll come up on the slide. These are the newest pictures that I took, so they're coming up before the older pictures. But when we talk about halls, not hotels, but halls, this was the site of the Oddfellows Hall from the 1800s to 1903, and then it burnt down. But there were two businesses in the bottom floor, and then their storage for their businesses were on the second floor. R.B. Freese had a mill and grain, like Jermyn Mill and Grain had, and R.B. Freese Mill and Grain had before. That was in the basement, which would have faced Main Street here, and then there was another store on this side facing, and their storage was in the second floor. And on the third floor was Oddfellows Hall. That's where the International Order of Oddfellows met, and there were several other Oddfellows, several other organizations that met in the hall. So that was the place of Oddfellows Hall. It was one of the oldest halls in Jermyn. Okay. All right, now we're going to mix up between hotels and halls because of the rotation of the pictures. This is the Masonic Hall, which is the current hall that's there now. That's one of the halls that's still in existence. That was called the Davis Building, and there were stores on the bottom. If you remember, some of the people my age will remember it as the State Store being in that building. That's where everybody went, and Mr. Jones ran that as long as I remember him being there. But that building with the symbol up on top, you see it right here, that's the Masonic symbol. That is the Masonic Hall. It is still there, it's still a hall, and it was there, probably built around 1906, 1907, somewhere in that time frame, because we had what was called the Great Fire in 1904, which was the largest fire in Jermyn that took out 5 buildings and part of a 6th building and part of a 7th building. And that fire went from where this building is and this building is. There was a building right over, this is the creek by the Windsor. There was the big double building right over the creek, built right over the creek. Next to that was a wooden building, and that burnt, and we are going to have pictures of that too, because it was in that same picture. And then the Windsor Inn next to it, and I'll show you a picture of the Windsor Inn. It'll come up on here, I hope. Well, I'll show you a little interesting fact on the Windsor. Okay, so we'll go to the next one. That's just, you can flip through that one. That was just a shot of Main Street, and I had a car pull out just as I was taking it. So we'll go to the next one. This building, I was hoping Jimmy Riley was here. Jimmy Riley lived in this building on Gibson Street, and Joni Hunter owned the building. But this building was called Reimer's Hall. This was here in the 1800s. It had a movie theater at one point or something to that effect in the upstairs, because they found some of the backdrop and stuff on there, but it was called, the upper part of that was Reimer's Hall. And we know that was here in 1873 because in the record book of the Masons, who were founded on October 10th, I believe, 1873, they met in a hall on Main Street, and then they eventually went to this hall here. So we do know this hall was here in the 1870s, because 1878 the Masons met in this hall. This was called Reimer's Hall. Reimer was also one of the council members, one of the early council members in Jermyn, and he was also a Mason. He was also one of the master masons in the early 1800s in Jermyn. And it's also Reimer's Hall, so you can go right past it. This building was owned by the Esgrove family at one time. It says Dulce Dunham, which means happy home, I think, in Latin.
Yes.
This was at one time the very first school, the very first church, and one of the very first halls. This was called Messitt's Hall, M-E-S-S-I-T-T, Messitt's Hall. And it doesn't look like much here, but if you get a side view of it, you'll see it was a long building. And that's where the hall was upstairs. But that was where the very first school was, the very first church, and the very first elections in the borough. The first elections in 1870, in January of 1870, were taken in this building here. That's Dulce Dunham. Okay, we'll do the next one. This building, I don't know, could anybody tell me what building that is? Matthias's house, right? That's where Kevin Toolan lives right now. And that was, I gotta get back to my notes on that to see exactly, make sure I get the name right on that one. Okay. Where the heck is that now? Where the tin shop? A man named Isley had a tin shop there. And let's see if I wrote it down on the right paper or not. Okay, that was Colley's Hall. The upstairs of that was a hall. It was called Colley's, C-A-W-L-E-Y-S, Colley's Hall. Huey Colley owned it. He was a tinsmith, and the hall was upstairs. So that was called Colley's Hall. So it still exists, but it now is a house. So that was in the 1800s as well. That was early on. And this is next door. This is where Roman Motors is now. And there were 2 or 3 different hotels that were there under different names. And we don't have a timeline on them, but we're going to work on trying to find out where the timeline actually is on those. One of them was Andy Gavin's. Andy Gavin's is now in Scranton, but it started in Jermyn. Andy Gavin had a hotel bar on Main Street right around this location, either where Kennedy's building is or where Roman Motors is. It was also called, at the same time, next door or right at the same place, it was called the Forest House. And that was there in 1905. We don't know if it was the same thing, but then there was a Forest House in Scranton. So people, after the mines left and we started to drop our population, people started leaving, they started going to Scranton. And the Forest House ended up going to Scranton, Andy Gavin's ended up going to Scranton. So those two There was also,
Hey Bruce, that part of the building there was only built in 1960s.
yeah, that was in the 60s when Matthijs, but this was way back in the early 1900s when it was a
I
hotel.
just wanted to know if you knew that building wasn't there before.
Oh yeah, no, that wasn't there. I knew that. I remember when they built that. I remember when I was a kid, that we used to play down there. We went to Matthijs's.
Well, I carried the cinder blocks for it.
We used to roller skate in there.
Yeah, they have a path.
We roller skated in there.
You roller skated in
It
there?
was just a bag. We used to roller skate there.
Oh, okay, I didn't know that. You lived down by there.
Yeah.
Danny Meehan also had a hotel down there, Meehan's Hotel. I don't know if it was Danny Meehan that we knew, that you would know, the people in the back there, but could have been his father that had the hotel, and that was also early on, turn of the century or earlier. Meehan's Hotel was also in that area. So there was roughly 3 hotels right in that spot. Okay, we'll go to the next slide and see what comes. I think the next slide.
Why was there 3 hotels right there?
What's that?
Why was there 3 right there? What
Well,
was
they were-
connecting?
There were so many miners that, see, the reason that hotels would have been in this area was because the mines were right across the river. And if you go down Bridge Street and across, that's where the first breaker was. In 1857, the first mine was dug, and the first breaker was built in 1860. The second breaker was built later on, 1862, 1864, somewhere around there. But we had 2 breakers in that same area in East Jermyn where Rapid Pallet is now. That was where the breakers were. And there was one there, and then one back, it was up farther, be close to the right-hand side of the top of the Casey Highway, just before you get on the ramp. That's where the second breaker was. So that's the reason all the hotels were built close by. And in fact, one of them here says, see if I can pull up what I just said. It was opposite the, yeah. The Mr. Meehan's Hotel was opposite of the Silk Mill on Main Street. The Silk Mill is where the winery is now. So that when right where the winery is, with a great big silk mill built by John Jermyn in 1870, and that's where there was actually a gas station there too at one time. I remember the gas station being there. I don't remember the pumps in working operation as a gas station, but I remember the island being there where you could see where they could pull in on both sides. But there was an interesting story there about the trolley too. The trolley was coming and jumped the track going up the hill towards the Methodist Church and rolled back and hit the building right there on the corner. The trolley jumped the track and they had to put it back on the track and get it going again. All right, next slide should be Kennedy, so it's just going to be the same thing. Yeah, that's Kennedy. So that's just giving us a location of what was there. This was Matthijs's Dairy back in the day. Nick Matthijs, I think it was the 1940s when they built that. That was when Matthijs's Dairy was open, and then when they closed, then they bought it for Kennedy's, and it was a beer distributor ever since then. But that's the area where the hotels would have been for the miners. This building here was not a hotel. Do you guys people know where this is? This is on the corner of Bacon Street and Main Street. This is right on the, all right? It's just up the road from where we were just talking about. This was S.D. Davis's house, Sumner Danford Davis. Sumner Danford Davis came here in 1869, right out of college. He had borrowed $50 from his brother or an uncle, and he started a business with a drugstore. He was also the very first master and first secretary, the second secretary of the Masons in 1873. He was on council. I think he might have been one of the first auditors. And he had a drugstore, an opera house, and a hall. It was called Enterprise Hall. He also ran a newspaper called the Enterprise Newspaper. It was the German press after that, but he started a newspaper in the 1800s called the Enterprise Newspaper. Now, his building, there's a picture of his building right there. So when you come up late, you'll see it. I think I took pictures of all of these and they'll come up and I'll go over them. But S.D. Davis, Sumner Davis, he had a great big mutton chop beard and he was a skinny little guy and he was a Democrat. So that's all a lot that I know about him. That's all I know. I don't want to get into politics, but it did say that he was a Democrat. So you want to flip that? And that was few and far between in Jermyn in those days. Now this building is right next door. This was a dress factory. It was Stanley Holowitz's cigarette warehouse. Now that it's empty, vacant now, it's not being used. It was a dress factory. I think it was Michael's dress factory maybe? I don't remember, but I know Gail Rosemorgie's wife. Mazzari owned it? Okay, Mazzari's. Michael's must have been the other one. But anyway, this is where Sumner Davis's Opera House and Hall was, Enterprise Hall. That was right next door to his house. That's a picture of it right there. It'll come up later. But that was a hall built in the early 1800s, 1880s probably, late 1800s. I mean, around in the 1880s. And it doesn't show on some of the early maps like this one, but it was there during the 1880s. All right.
Bruce, what is it like? What is it right there? What is it now?
What is it now? It's just an empty, vacant building, just sitting there waiting for somebody to buy it, or the sheriff's waiting for a sheriff's sale, or I don't know what it's. This building I took next to it, and I believe this is the Nielsen building. I believe there was a hall up on top, and there's a whole bunch of hall names that I have that I can't verify where they were. So I'm trying to work on trying to figure out what hall would have been up here. This was called the Nielsen building at that time. So I took a picture of it so we'd have, at least it looks worse now probably than it did back in the 1800s. You know? And the people in it are pretty miserable too. At least one of them is. So I can verify that. All right, we'll go to the next slide. Now this is Muldoon Apartments. And that was Muldoon's Bar. That's brand new now. They're working on that, refinished it. People are living in it. But that was Muldoon's Bar. I remember it as a bar when I was a kid. It was right on Main Street on the opposite side. It was on the same side we're on now, just up the road on the right-hand side. Muldoon's owned a meat market before they owned a bar. On the left-hand side, farther down on Main Street, Muldoon's owned a meat market. And it was a very popular, they sold a lot of very good quality meats. And then Muldoon's also had a funeral home. So if you go right from where we are now, 2 buildings to our left was Muldoon's funeral home. So we did have 2 funeral homes in town at once, but Muldoon is a very well-known name from the 1800s all the way through in Jermyn. Okay? And we do have, on that table, we have a Muldoon's beer bottle from the 1800s. This is Vitucci's landscaping building right now, and this was the site of St. George Hotel. This was the 4th hotel built in Jermyn. St. George Hotel, built by Louis Pizer, who built the very first one, and he also was the owner of the Sweeney Hotel at one time. I'm going to give you a little bit on St. George Hotel. Built in 1872. It's 1 block to the east of his original first hotel, which was the 4 Mile Hotel. The last thing you'll remember about it, it was owned by Kevin Pittock. It was called Earl's. And that burned in, I don't know if I have the date, but no, I don't have the date on it, but there was a fire there that leveled that, and that was the last thing that was there before it became a vacant lot. But that was called Snuffy's, I believe? Rusty's?
R-U-S-K-I.
Oh, okay. But it was also called Snuffy's.
Well, that was after the Second World War.
Yeah, it was Snuffy's a long time ago. And that was owned by After Louis Pizer sold that, it was owned by a Solomon, J.H. Solomon, and then he gave it to his daughters. His daughters were the Griffiths, and I have an article on that and a picture of that, which will come up on the slide. So I'm going to read a little bit about it if I can get it off this paper. The St. George Hotel. Here's what it says about the St. George Hotel in the German press, March 1st, 1907. Of the 3 excellent hotels of Jermyn, the most popular among traveling men and transient visitors for a number of years back has been the Hotel St. George. The St. George was for years conducted by the late John H. Solomon and is now owned by his 2 married daughters, Mrs. Martha Griffiths and Mrs. Jean Reagan, who have entrusted the management of the place to Nicholas Reagan. Within the last few years, several thousands of dollars have been spent on improvements, and today it is one of the best equipped hotel properties in the Upper Valley, being heated by steam, lighted with electricity, baths and toilets, a well-stocked bar, stables, public parlors, and all modern conveniences. Excellent accommodations are provided, and the house enjoys a widespread reputation for its good rooms, clean, comfortable beds, and excellent meals. The bar is always well filled with all the standard grades of wet goods, and in every way possible, guests are made to feel that they can find as good accommodations in Jermyn as they can be found anywhere in the valley. While permanent boarders are accommodated, the house caters especially to commercial trade. Mr. Reagan is well and very favorably known here in Jermyn and has a strong following. By his accommodating manner and courtesy, he was helped considered by in attracting a large share of the local hotel trade, and today the house is as prosperous, successful, and well conducted as any hotel in the borough. Mr. Reagan is a member of the Crystal Fire Company No. 1, the Fraternal Order of Eagles of Carbondale, and may be said to be one of Jermyn's most popular hotel men. And that was the Hotel St. George. And that was the late 1800s, early 1900s. And it looked like that almost up until it was changed to Earl's. So we'll see a picture of that pretty soon once we get through these newer pictures. There's another building on Main Street. If you don't know what this is, the last thing you would remember was a fire there in 1977 where 2 young children were killed in the fire. And that was the Collins building. It was owned by Agnes and Grace Collins. Their picture is down here. And it was the Collins, they had a soda shop in there. You could go in and get ice cream. You could dance in there. That was called the Rosalind back in the day, where some of you can probably remember it as the Rosalind. I don't go back that far, but some of them do. We'll have pictures of that here. We have a picture of people dancing there, and Agnes and Grace, and we have a picture of the fire, actually the day of the fire. That was the Collins Hotel. And before it was the Collins Hotel, when it was first built, it was the Avery Hotel. And there was a gigantic fire behind that in the Mumford Stables that threatened to burn that hotel down. Forshner's house, the Jermyn Mill and Grain, C.D. Winters, all the buildings around it. It was a very big explosion in the livery stable, and that was a big fire behind it. But right here in front was a great big stepping stone. If I remember it as a kid, it had 2 steps and a concrete block. And that was to get up into the stagecoach that used to travel on Main Street, which Main Street was called Plank Road. And it's still called Plank Road in Mayfield, but the original road, built in well, I guess it was built in the late 1800s, but it was paved and redone and everything in the early 1900s when they started paving. But this Main Street was called Plank Road. It was a wooden road back in the day when the stagecoaches rode. They laid planks across the road and just drove on it. So that was called Plank Road. And that's what Main Street was. There's still bricks underneath that from when they made it a brick road. Let's let's see where we're at now.
Bruce, during the Second World War, they tore up Main Street, and it was all brick.
Yeah,
And they tore up the trolley line because they needed to steal.
yeah, we have pictures
Because
in
I lived
our,
there, then I saw them digging it up.
we have pictures of the trolley lines in our building when it was a trolley, and it was an electric trolley, and it ran all the way from Scranton to Carbondale, and it was right down the middle of Main Street. We have pictures of it in snowstorms and everything else. That's where I was talking about the trolley coming off and running into a building and jumped the track. Now this building, all you ladies should know where it's at because you sit over in Longworth's all the time, but if you went out and looked out the front door, you would see this building. This was Cooch's Bar, I believe. The reason I have it on here twice, well, I have the picture on here, but it should be here twice, because it was Cooch's Bar, but in 1873, it was also called Kimback's Hall. Kimback's Hall was where the Masons first met in 1873. That was the very first meeting place of the Masonic Lodge of Aurora Lodge number 523 back in 1873. The upstairs was a hall and the downstairs was later on a bar, but Mr. Kimback owned that, and the Masons met there from 73 to 77, 1873 to 1877. And that was called Kimback's Hall and Cooch's Bar. All right, I think that was Cooch's Bar. I'm not 100% sure, but the next building over could have been Cooch's Bar, because I don't remember. Jimmy, you might know. Was this Cooch's or was this Adams?
No, that was not Adams.
Okay, so the next one over was Adams. All right, so we'll go to the next slide.
Anthracite Cafe was Adam Majikowski's.
That's
That's
good.
it.
That would have been Adams then.
Right.
I wasn't sure which was which because
There's Cooch's.
I was never in them, so I don't know.
There's Cooch's right there.
That's Cooch's?
Adam Majikowski sold it to Cooch.
Okay, so that was Cooch's and Adams Bar. We have pictures of that here as well.
Adam Majikowski's bar was on the left-hand side, and they had tournaments for, what do they call it?
Shuffleboard.
Shuffleboard, thank you.
Okay,
Shuffleboard.
that was before my time.
And on the right-hand side was his home, and in the back was a kitchen where she made homemade pizza. She made her own crust, and she made homemade pierogies, which they sold in Atlantic City by her brother
Oh,
on the boardwalk.
well, that's good to know. We'll write that all down and we'll put that in
And
our
up at
files.
the top, that was not apartments, that was her home where she raised 3 children, 3 girls.
Okay. Well, that was Cooch's Bar then. That was Adams and Cooch's. And that'll fit into where when we get to our bars and where they were. But we have that down as, let's see, Hendricks, St. Michael's, Cooch's Hall, that's over in East Jermyn. And yeah, that's in the bars on the next page. So let's go to the next one. These are all modern pictures that I just took, so we'll get to the older pictures as we get through it. Now this everybody knows is Longworth's. It's still here, it's still Longworth's now. This was Pelak's Bar when I was a kid. We have a picture of that as Pelak's Bar there. It was also at the Barbarossa at one time. It was, had quite a few different names. I believe it was Dick that told me that in the back, no, I know, it was Harold Coons that told me that in the kitchen of this, underneath the floor, was a still. So he would probably know, but he told me that there was a still underneath the kitchen floor with a trap door during Prohibition time, so that I don't know, but I know there was a couple stills in East Jermyn that were, people were arrested for having stills in their house. So I do know that over on East Jermyn there was at least 2 instances where the state police raided 2 stills over in East Jermyn. And they also arrested people on that tracks by bottlers for bringing in beer and alcohol from Canada on the trains, and they raided the train cars and unloaded everything off there. We do have records of that too. So go to the next one. This is on Main Street. This building here was, I think a guy named Davis owns it now. But this was Edwards Bar back in the day. Ted Edwards and Idris Edwards. We have pictures of them here, turn of the century, and one in 1918 when the guys came home from World War I. There's a picture of them there. This was Edwards' bar. There was a story in the newspaper, and I think I might even have a copy of that here, or if not, it's on that tape. Might be on that table. You can look at it when we're done. There was a fire in there, and one article says that they were eating supper, and they were alarmed by the fire. They had a bedridden child who had scarlet fever, and they had to take and carry them out on a stretcher and take them out the back because there was a stable behind it owned by Staples, the Staples family, and there was rooms above the stable, and they were on fire, and there was another family there that they also had to take out with kids on stretchers. So this was a big fire, and let me see if I don't know if I have the notes of what year that was.
Was there an ice cream parlor right once?
Yes.
What's that?
There was an ice cream.
Mary Marrera had an ice cream place in there at one time, yes. I can't remember the name of it, but it was an ice cream place there.
Merry-go-round?
Merry-go-round, that's what it was. Yep. Merry-go-round. All right, so that was Idris Edwards' bar and Idris or Ted Edwards. So we'll go to the next one. That is just a better picture of the Masonic Hall. We can skip through that because the hall is still there. This is an empty parking lot of the Windsor. This is the site of the Assembly Hall. Assembly Hall was there twice. It was built in the 1800s. It was a very popular hall where everybody met. There were meeting rooms on the third floor. There was a walk around all the way around the building. It was a 3-story building, very big, made out of wood. There were stores on the bottom floors. There was a movie house in there. O'Neill's movie house was in that building at one time. When it was wood, it was attached almost directly to the Windsor. And there's a picture of that right here, which should come up, but if you can see it at all, there's 2 buildings right next to each other. The Assembly Hall and the Windsor are almost connected together. So that'll come up in the older pictures.
I have a question for you. At all these halls that they had up and down the street, is that like another name for, like, was it usually a bar?
No.
Or what they do was just
The hall was a meeting room. They had dances, they had plays, Assembly Hall had a stage, and there's a picture right here of a performance on the stage at Assembly Hall. The school would have plays there because during the time of the school, it wasn't in the Borough Building where the school was when I went to school. It was in the old grade school. They didn't have a hall. They didn't have basketball courts. They didn't have any of that stuff. They were just school buildings. You went there for school, and that was it. So any of their plays, their graduations, their class nights, all of that was done in Assembly Hall. Assembly Hall was the largest building in town, the main meeting room in town. It was the place where everybody held any kind of events. There was probably weddings there. The dinners for the guys coming home from World War I was held there. All of that was in the Assembly Hall. Now that was right behind here, in the back corner of this parking lot, was a livery stable. And in 1904, that caught on fire, and it burned Assembly Hall, which was here. And you'll see a picture of the Windsor, and the Windsor had an addition on the left-hand side of the Windsor that's not there now. And that burnt, Assembly Hall burnt, the stable burnt, the double building that I showed you that was over the empty spot that was over the creek where there were 2 stores, that burnt. The building next to it was the Davis building, that burnt. And next to that was Dr. Matthew Shields, the founder of First Aid, his house, and that burnt. The only thing that saved the rest of the main street from burning was the bank, because it was built out of brick. 1902, they built the brick. So in 1903, that fire took 5 buildings completely down and helped partly destroy 2 other buildings. So that's where Assembly Hall was. Now, we do have a picture in this picture of Oddfellows Hall, which I'm hoping will come up, of when Mrs. Edmonds was rebuilding Assembly Hall. They built it out of brick. And that was up until not too long ago. That was just a picture, another picture of the Windsor to show you this is where Assembly Hall was. And this new addition that's on here with the thing, that's where the addition was on the Windsor that burnt during that fire. They saved the Windsor, but the edge of it burnt. So that was 1903 or 1904 fire. It was called the Great Fire in Jermyn.
Well, that brick building, when they built the brick building, that had the movie theater on the right side downstairs.
Yep.
And it had, Loretta O'Neill's 2 brothers had a restaurant on the left side. And roller skating was on the 2nd floor.
Yep.
And the meeting halls were on the 3rd floor.
On the 3rd floor. That's the same thing.
I know that because I was the last projectionist they ever had.
And that was the new Assembly Hall. The new Assembly Hall was the brick one, and that's the one where O'Neill's had their movie theater, the stores, and that's where they had another walkway around the upstairs,
Yeah.
and that was the meeting hall.
Sometimes you're watching a movie and you hear roller skaters on the 2nd floor.
Yes. Now this fire here in 1897, if you can read that, if not I can read it for you, but the Parish Hall on South Main Street. Now the Parish Hall, for people who don't know, and there's a lot of you probably don't know, that was the church from Archibald, St. Thomas Church in Archibald. They brought it from Archibald to Jermyn because the Catholics wanted to have a church in Jermyn. They didn't have one at that time. So they brought the church up and rebuilt it, or transferred the whole thing on a wagon, I don't know. But they brought it up, and if you know where Mary Golden lives, it's a big brick building just up from where you lived. Lives up on the next building from Donna Stackel's house on the right-hand side. That beautiful brick house on Main Street. Right directly behind her house was where the first Catholic church was built. And that was in the 1800s. And they started to build a new church, and they were meeting in the basement of the new church before the church was finished, and they were going to use this as a hall. This was going to be a hall. So this was Parish Hall, and they never got to use it because in 1897, at quarter after 5 in the morning, it burnt down.
Why did everything burn like what?
Was there a major arsonist? Like-
We believe there was the articles in the paper about fires say that Jermyn is now beating Mayfield for the amount of fires that there were. Because Mayfield had the same kind of fire. There was somebody going around burning down buildings. And as far as I know, there is no article that I can find of anybody who found out who it was or they arrested anybody. Now there could have been, and we just didn't find it yet. But I haven't searched all the newspapers that I can find for everything because I'm building this building and don't have time. So, you know, all the time I'm spending over there, I'm looking at stuff as I'm putting it away and organizing it. But I really don't have time to look it up. Once we get settled and we have newspapers.com, and then everybody can come and look at it, they can sit in the office and research this, I'm sure that we'll get more people to come and help, and they can sit around and research, and we'll be able to do that. I don't have newspapers.com at my house, and I don't have the time to do it while I'm doing everything over there now. So this is just one that I found as I was putting things away and organizing into binders. So this is about the fire of the Parish Hall. So That was another one of the halls that was in Jermyn. This is the 1963 fire of the Hotel Windsor when Joe Maratska owned it. You can see the flame shooting out of the top. And this is the roof coming through the roof. That's the 3rd floor up here. And this is exactly what it looks like now, except the windows aren't out like they are. That's the way the windows looked on all of them. But that's the fire of 1963 that took the top of the Windsor off. And Joe Maratska and Viola Maratska were the owners at that time. All right. And this is the fire that took the top off the Collins building, which was Avery's Hotel. This is the fire in 1977 when the 2 boys were killed in the fire upstairs. But that's what the Collins Hotel looked like at that time. It had the porch, and in fact, I don't know if you can still see the stepping block down here or not, but that's where it was.
What year was that fire?
This one was 1977.
1977.
Yeah, this was on Christmas Eve. I remember going to church, and I remember the fire, Christmas Eve, 1977. Now this is not a hall. This was a church. You guys know this building? Okay. This is what we're working on to get finished. This is what it looks. This is sort of a little bit of trying to bring it back to what it was in 1884. It was a church, a Welsh Congregational Church in 1884. And I don't know if they had a name for the hall, that the actual church, but it did have a kitchen, and they only spoke Welsh. They didn't speak English in this church until later on. And it's coming back to become a church now. So click on, see how far we go here. And that's a little bit better angle of it. And let's see if there's any more. If not, we might have to go back to the beginning and go forward. Okay, all right, these are the older pictures now. So this is Oddfellows Hall. This is in 1898. That's Oddfellows Hall. That's on that empty lot across from the Windsor. And there's a good picture of 3 stories of the Windsor when it was you'll see there's a door here, a door here, a door here, a door here, 3 stories with a roof. And this is that little tiny building still sits there. That was called Jimmy Steele's Candy Store back in the day.
You're talking about the windows down. I want to tell you down the basement.
Yep.
Those windows are still there, like in the rocks.
They're still there.
Yeah, so that's below that, like 6 feet, 7 feet below that.
Yeah. See, this road was all built up after these buildings were built. These buildings were built in the early 1800s, late 1800s, and then that road was raised up all the way through. Now this picture was taken, if you see this wood that's here, this was Freese's lumber yard, or mill and grain. It's right now it's where Jermyn Supply. Jermyn Supply has their business there now, and Herbert's Garage was there. But this was R.B. Freese's, not R.B. Freese, that's up in Forest City, but this was Freese's mill and grain. And that also caught on fire and burned down.
Bruce was his name, Hank?
Hank Freese?
Hank Freese.
Yeah, H something Freese. But that picture was taken, and you'll see there's a great big, Main Street went down straight, but this road went all the way around like this, a big arch, and then went down Main Street. That was about probably 30, 40, 50 feet wide, maybe 60 or 70 feet wide on Main Street before they changed it and put the houses there and some other things there. This is McDermott's Bar. We have a picture of that here. This is McDermott's Bar. You can see it in the window. It says McDermott. One of these guys is McDermott, and I think I have the names on here. I do. William McDermott's Bar at 200 Delaware Street. The man on the left is John McDermott. His son, Michael McDermott. A customer, they don't know who it was. And the lady over here is Stella Pendred Vizard.
My grandmother.
Your grandmother. So there we, see how we connect to the public here?
She lived across the, she almost lived.
Stella, that's Stella Pendred Vizard. And that's McDermott's Bar, back in the 1800s. There is a McDermott's beer bottle on the table. We do also have on the table on that side in the frame is the information on the permits they got for putting the labels stamped in glass on the bottles. They had to get a patent to put the name on the bottles in a certain way. And there's 3 or 4 different patents that they got to put the name on in certain different ways. But they bottle their own beer, Muldoon's bottle their own beer, and Messett's is in the middle, they bottle their own soda, I believe. So let's go to the next one. This is Edwards' Bar. This is on Main Street where that gray building was, I said was Edwards' Bar. Chrissy Sullivan gave us this picture. And let's see if I have the names of those people here. I think I do. If I can find it, yeah. This is Mr. Edwards here, and I think this is his son. But that's where that gray building is on Main Street that is just two buildings down from Battenberg. This is in 1919. 624 Washington Avenue. This is Mike. We have another connection here. Mary, what was your name? What was your family name?
Loftus?
This is Mike Loftus.
My great-grandfather.
There you go. See how we connect to the people that are here? And this is Ted Edwards, Rebecca Edwards, and Gertrude Edwards, and then this is their son. I don't know the 2 people. They must have worked there at the bar. But that's Edwards' Bar, and we now have 2 connections. Okay, let's go to the next one. All right, this is the Hotel Windsor in 1919, and you can see the main street going down through here. This is with the big porch on and all decorated out, and this is called the Blue Room at the time, because this was when it was the Blue Bird Hotel. And you'll see up here on the top, see that great big building on the side over here? That was the new assembly hall that was built out of brick by Olive Edmonds. And that's looking down on Main Street. And that was at the end of World War I, 1919.
Bruce, I don't think it was ever called the Bluebird Hotel, right?
Yes, it was. We have a postcard that says right on it.
Because they never changed the name of the Windsor, it was the Bluebird Restaurant.
It was the Bluebird Restaurant, but it was also called the Bluebird Hotel on the postcard.
I never heard that at all.
And Mrs. Alt ran it at that time. They might have taken the sign down, they might have had it not on there, but I think it says Bluebird right there. It doesn't say the Windsor on it anywhere at that time.
I know it was Bluebird Restaurant.
Yeah, I think for a short period of time, they changed the name, and Mrs. Alt, A-L-T,
Yeah.
she ran it.
Well, that's because George Edmonds died in 1915.
Well, right after that is when they took it over. Now, this is the original picture of the Windsor, 1904. I changed this because it was wrong. The baby is Mary Edmonds Muehlheisen, and her parents are on the right here. There's the horse. This says Hotel Windsor. This has the 2 little balconies. You see the 3 floors. Here's the addition on the side of the Windsor. That's the addition that burnt during the fire of 1904. Because if this couldn't be 1906, that's what Walter Avery had on the thing in our files, 1906.
My mother was born in 1906.
But it couldn't be 1906. It couldn't be 1906 because this was gone in 1904 when the fire was there.
Well, I can't help it, but that picture of my mother as a baby there, she was born in 1906.
Well, you're saying that it was your mother.
1904.
You're saying it was your mother and the baby.
She is.
But if this addition is here and the old assembly hall is here, it can't be because it burnt down in 1904.
How they looked at it. She was-
So you'll have to go back and double check to see if that was her in that picture. It could have been another baby in the carriage in 19, it could have been holding the
She always
baby.
told me that was her.
But that picture had to be taken, it had to be taken before the fire in 1904. Because that addition burnt off the edge here, and this building burnt in 1904. That was a great fire.
Oh, yeah, it was thinking.
Yeah, I think she lied about it.
So you better go back and check, she might have been older than she was. Wait, we have another question.
Picture before,
Picture before.
yeah. Just wondering, how that handwriting on there? Do you know whose handwriting that is?
I don't. That's probably, I would say, go back one more to Assembly Hall.
Yeah.
I would say that handwriting is George Grotowski.
Yes,
It
it
came
is.
out of the
That's
Grotowski,
my dad's too.
that came out of the Grotowski collection that we have in a binder. And he wrote on everything
Oh,
because
yeah.
he was a big historian. He loved history. We got a lot of pictures from him.
He used to have his own article in the Straight Times.
Oh, I didn't know that.
He had his own historical section in the
We'll have to find that.
No?
All right, go back a couple pictures, no, one more. All right, this is inside Edwards' bar on Main Street, 624. This was owned by Chrissy Sullivan. That's Teddy Edwards. That's what the inside of the bar looked like. They're beautiful chairs, the wooden chairs at the back. And that picture is also here. This is Edwards' bar on Main Street, right where the gray building was where Mary Marrera had the ice cream place. All right. And there it is. It says Bluebird Hotel on the postcard right there.
Yeah, so you see.
Jermyn, Pennsylvania. The Windsor sign is gone. There's no more Windsor sign there. This was the Bluebird Hotel and Bluebird Restaurant at that period of time.
Well, that's news to me.
And that we have that postcard here. But you see how beautiful this was with the windows that came out, had flowers up on the top here. You had a door here, a door here, a door here, entranceway here. There was another door over here, and it shows the newer. This is the new assembly hall up there. That's the newer assembly hall. So that was when it was the Bluebird Hotel.
Where was any mode of transportation in all these pictures?
It was all horses most of the time, but there was probably some cars in this period because this is in the 1919s, 1920s. We don't have pictures of Main Street. They took pictures of the buildings and not the vehicles, so they really didn't take a good shot of Main Street. But we do have some that I brought that I didn't bring them with me here, but we have them of Main Street in general with the trolley going up the street. And we have some with the horse and buggies coming down the hill by the Forest House and the Meehan's Hotel. We do have some pictures of horse and buggies and things like that, and the trolley and the tracks. And we have some old Model T, Model A, and 1930s and 40s cars. So we do have pictures of Main Street, but we don't have any. In these pictures here, they were trying to get a picture of the building without any traffic going by it. Because back then they had to stand, you know, with their head under a hood and hold a thing and click it and make sure nobody moved. So, all right, next one. This is also Edwards' bar. You can see the bar sign here, the first aid symbol in the center. That's Ted Edwards over here. And I don't know who those three people are, but that's a nice 10-point buck. And we do have that picture right there by Edwards' bar as well. That's right on Main Street. And they used their beautiful chairs that were in the bar and laid the dead deer on top of it. And I do have a rifle just like that. I do have one. You'll see it in the museum when it's open.
There's another deer hanging.
And then, yeah, there's another deer hanging, but that I can't see how many. But that's hanging from the roof.
Well, that's what the first aid sign was Dr. Shields.
I don't know. He lived right across the street from there at one time, but at this time here, Dr. Shields probably was gone and moved out because his house burned, and he left. He went to New York. He traveled with the Red Cross all over the country, and you know he was gone by then. Okay, we'll go to the next one. And this is another picture. This is that one I tried to show you of. This is the front of Assembly Hall. So this is also from the Grotowski collection.
I know that writing.
This is Assembly Hall, and it's, I can't read whether it says Mary House or whatever on the top. It says Hotel Windsor, Farmers Hotel, 1918, when our boys were coming home after the World War. So you can see it's all decorated out, and then again, it's still got dirt road in front of it. Still doesn't have anything as far as bricks or pavement or anything like that at that time.
1918.
And you can also see there's some big buildings going up Rushbrook Street on the side, on that side. All right. Well, wait.
The one next to it, didn't it burn in 1904?
Yes.
The wooden one burnt in 1904.
Oh, okay.
This is the brick one. This is the new one
Okay.
that Dick's mother rebuilt. Well, it was her mother and father. And there's a picture of that Oddfellows Hall that shows the pile of bricks laying on Main Street. They just dumped them in the middle of the road to build the Assembly Hall. Okay, now we go to the next one. This is Assembly Hall. This is the stage of Assembly Hall and the Jermyn movies. And I don't know what year it was, but to me it looks like late 1800s, early 1900s, turn of the century. But they do have a regular tie and a goofy looking collar. I would say it's probably a turn of the century. That might have been in the old Assembly Hall, but it could have been early on in the new one in the early 1900s. But that's that time period. And if you look at these chairs look like the chairs that were in the German high school.
Yep.
The fold-up wooden chairs, the old brown
yes.
wooden chairs that you would sit on in the German high school. These look like the same chairs with the numbers on the backs, and I think there's still some of them in that building in the basement.
That's the basement.
And I'm going to try to steal one for the building.
Yeah.
Okay, let's go to the next one. This is in the little thing about the Bluebird Restaurant on North Washington Avenue. It was entered by a man at 11:45 o'clock last evening who attempted to burglarize the place. The would-be thief was seen entering the building through a window by a man on a northbound trolley car. He notified Chief of Police David Kennedy, who quickly arrived on the scene. The burglar had succeeded in cutting the wires and securing a pay telephone, which contained a sum of money, but was still in sight. The chief and another number of other men gave chase, but were unable to catch the man. He left the telephone box on the outside of the building. Although the intruder was not caught, he was recognized and arrest was probably followed. The pay telephone was found and returned to the restaurant. So that was in the Bluebird Restaurant, a pay telephone. And that would have been 1925, so we do know it was the Bluebird Restaurant Hotel in 1925. Okay, we go to the next one.
10 times a day.
And this is the Windsor Hotel in 1907. It's just a blurred picture, but this is the article that I'm going to read about the Windsor Hotel. This is from the newspaper, the German Press, March 1st, 1907. There is no feature that has stranger influence in creating favorable comment of a town than its facilities for the accommodation of visitors. For the Hotel Windsor Jermyn can boast one of the best equipped, best furnished, and most modern public houses in the entire Lackawanna Valley. The property is owned by Levi Snyder and George Edmonds jointly, but Mr. Edmonds has always had the sole management of the business. Being a man of exceptional energy and thoroughly progressive, Mr. Edmonds has spent thousands of dollars on improvement of property, has been enlarged, modernized, and now up to date in every way. Few hotels, even in Scranton and Carbondale, being as well equipped. It has all the modern improvements and steam heated throughout, baths and toilets on all 3 floors, lighted by electricity, large verandas, large dining rooms, parlors, and reception rooms. A splendidly fitted up bar and handsomely furnished from top to bottom. Mr. Edmonds takes a great deal of pride in his house and has always aimed to continue it as a strictly first-class line. That he possesses exceptionally good business ability can be realized when it is stated that from the original investment of $9,000 in 1893, that's when Edmonds has bought it, 1893, he was within 13 years developed the property where it is today worth at least $25,000. Gee, you should have bought it then, Andy. You could have got it cheaper. Mr. Edmonds is one of the borough's active, public, spirited citizens and has in various ways contributed to the improvement of mutual, and it's hard to read, it's really faded out, mutual conditions. He erected the Assembly Hall building, the largest and thickest brick building in town, in which is located a fine hall and stage for the production of theatrical and for dancers, sociables, and entertainment on the third floor of the finest furnished lodge room in Lackawanna County, equipped with the very latest electrical devices and convenience used in initiate services by the different orders which meet here. The whole bunch of different organizations. The Masons also met there. I think the Daughters of the American Revolution might have met there. I think the Odd Fellows ended up meeting there. I think the Knights of Pythias met there. There's a whole bunch of different organizations, and they're all secret societies, so we can't tell you anything about them. Few men were better known here today and are more popular or have been more successful than George Edmonds. He is essentially a self-made and has many opportunities. And then you can't read it after that, and it says solely through his push, ambition, and determination. That's a story of George Edmonds. And he also owned the Sweeney Hotel at one time.
All the Edmondses that we knew growing up, they all went to the Catholic Church. Well, they were originally from Wales.
Yeah, you told me that story, that all the Edmondses were Welsh,
They were Welsh.
and then they somehow married one Catholic woman who changed them all to Catholic.
My grandfather's father married a girl from Bush and Reed, and she was Irish, and all the kids had to be Catholic.
So now they're all Irish Catholic. They came from Wales, and now they're all Irish Catholic.
So
Like the old Tools,
Yeah.
same thing, right? Let's go to the next
My
one.
mother was a Presbyterian. Came from a mixed marriage.
All right, that's a story that I just read from that book, so we'll just skip over that. I didn't know I had. That's a picture of the St. George Hotel. You can see the people on the porch and the beautiful design on the front porch. That's a really bad picture that Walter copied out of the newspaper back in 1907, but I can't get a better picture than that. But that's what the St. George Hotel, that's right where Vitucci's garage is now. So if you go to the next one. That's the story I read about the St. George Hotel, so we can skip through that one too. But that was not right where Vitucci's is. This one here, this tells a story about a hotel that I never heard of, and a bar that I never heard of. But this hotel in Jermyn was raided on the charge of an 18-year-old boy. State police visited John Selinsky's. Do you know anything about that, Dick?
No.
From the history? So I don't know, this was 1920 something, 25 or 23 or somewhere. But complaint of an 18-year-old boy, Ira Smepre of Jermyn. State police working out of Jermyn raided a hotel conducted by John Selinsky of Main Street and report confiscating a quantity of liquor. The owner of the hotel was given a hearing last night before Justice of the Peace Herman Kiefer of Jermyn and pleaded guilty to the charge. He was fined $50 and costs. According to the state police, the Smepre boy purchased several drinks of liquor in Selinsky's hotel Tuesday. He became intoxicated and is said to have lost a sum of money. The youth informed the state police with the result that the raid was made. A quart of alleged whiskey and a similar quantity of alleged gin was reported to have been seized in the raid. At the hearing last night, however, the youth denied that he had made the complaint. And that was how we found a little bit about another hotel called the Solinsky Hotel. We have no idea where it is except it's on Main Street. So that's another one we have to find when we get into, start searching in our building. So as we search, we'll see if we can find that, more information on that too. Now this is Anthracite Cafe, which is with Adams, I guess. And there's Jimmy Rosemorgy sitting at the bar. And that's on Main Street. That's where, right across from Longworth. Jim Rosemorgy. Jim Rosemorgy owned the Sunoco gas station that would be right where the Girl Scout Corner is now. That was a Sunoco gas station when I was a kid, and Jimmy Rosemorgy owned that, and I remember getting gas there with my father as a kid. So that was Jimmy Rosemorgy's Sunoco station. That's Jim Rosemorgy. We have his shirt hanging up in our museum when he was from his gas station with the Sunoco label on it. Okay, we'll go to the next one. And this is Adams. This is Adams Bar on Main Street. And I don't know if I have the names of the people in that picture or not. No, I don't. I don't have the names of the people in that picture. But this is Zaleski that owned the bar. So I think this is Helen's Bar.
Helen.
This is where Helen's Bar was, because Zaleski's owned it later. So I think that's Helen's Bar up on the northern side of Main Street.
It's still there.
Still there. I have a picture of it now, so it should come up later. So
What was the name of the bar that the 18-year-old got arrested in?
Solinsky, Selinsky. All right, this is also Zaleski's Bar. A different picture. You see a picture of FDR back there. So it was during the time around the World War II time when FDR was president. So that's Zelinsky's Bar, his bartender, and two guys sitting at the bar. Pretty nice looking bar. But that was where Helen's Bar is, where this is just up from Oddfellows Hall, going on Mayfield on the left-hand side where Rechack lives now. All right, we'll go to the next one. And of course, this is Pelax. This is Longworth's restaurant. But that's Pelax Bar. That's what I remember it as when I was a kid. That's the one with the still in the floor, the kitchen in the basement. So that's Pelax Bar. And that's a nice picture. We have a nice picture of that over at the building. This is the inside, according to Jimmy Durst, who said he spent lots of time there. This is the inside of Pelax Bar, which you see the nice metal chairs. You know, that when the bar is up there, that's the front room. That's what Longworth looks like now on the one side, but that's what Pelax Bar looked like back in the day. And that's Agnes Florence Collins and Grace Collins. That's the two old ladies that I remember. Grace Collins, I don't remember. Well, I remember both of them, but Grace Collins was the one that really was there all the time when I was a kid. So she had the ice cream place. We used to go in there and get ice cream, and you get milkshakes, and they had their own soda fountain on the right-hand side as you walked in. So that's Grace Collins. Florence
ran the post office.
Florence ran the post office? All right, well that's Florence and that's Grace. I remember Grace more than Florence. I do remember her, but I do remember Grace more. All right, so then this is when it was called the Rosalind. So this is 1941. Agnes Collins is at the jukebox in the back. So is there anybody dancing in this picture in the ladies? Do you know any of these? Are you guys up here? That's in the Rosalind, then Collins is. You could have been in this picture, I don't know. 1941. Good lady looks like a movie star. But that's what the inside. See the crystal chandeliers hanging in the back? Everything hanging, the beautiful decorations on the walls. A nice hotel back in the day. All right, let's go to the next one. 1941, that's the fire again. 1977, we skip through that. I didn't know I had it twice in there. And this is the Castle Gardens. Castle Grande. This is built by Michael Cooch. This was built for the Russian immigrants that came here to work in the mines. He had a store in the basement, and this is where all of the Russian miners lived back in the day. So that was Cooch's Castle Gardens. And that building is no longer there. We played in that as kids. We ran up and down and played Army in there, and we ran up and down and envisioned ghosts in the building and everything else when we were kids. And you know, this is Dr. Davis's. This is the one that I said is right where Stanley Holowitz's building is on Main Street. This had an opera hall, an Oddfellows hall there. When the Oddfellows burnt, they met here. It had an opera house. It had its pharmacy. It had another business in there. And the Oddfellows Hall. That's 503 Washington Avenue. That's what it looked like back in the 1880s, and early 1900s, before that probably burnt down too. All right, next.
Where'd they tie their horses at?
There was hitching posts all along Main Street, and the back of the buildings all had stables and places where they could put wagons and put hitch wagons in the back. All of the backs of the properties, almost every one of them had a stable or some place where they could tie their horses. This is the Jermyn family. I think this might be the last picture. This is John Jermyn here. John Jermyn he came here in 1869 or 70, I think it was 70. He came here, he ran a couple of mines. He ran one in Archibald, and he ran one in Oliphant, and started working in one on the East Mountain in Scranton. Came here from England, and came with his parents back in the 1800s, and came to Jermyn in 1869 and took over the mine from Judge John Gibson. And John Gibson was a Philadelphia judge and lawyer, lived in the house where Mary Golden lives. That was the Gibson estate. And John Jermyn came and he lived in the house that's on Main Street. Next to the community house, there's an empty lot, and then a house that was John Jermyn's house at one time. And a lot of his kids were born in Jermyn. Some of them were born later in Scranton, but these are all of his sons. This one over here, that one, that's E.B. Jermyn. E.B. Jermyn was the mayor of Scranton 2 terms. Arrested in the 2nd term, or not arrested. I don't know if he was fully arrested, but he was kicked out of office because there was so much graft and prostitution and smuggling of liquor and stuff back in the day, and he turned a blind eye to it. He didn't let them arrest all the people that they should have been arrested, and they sort of kicked him out of office. But that's E.B. Jermyn. This up here in the tall one is Joseph Jermyn. Joseph Jermyn Ray was also a Mason. He was a member of the Masonic order in Jermyn. John Jermyn was one of the original members of the Masons in 1873. He was the first mayor of Jermyn in 1870, the first Burgess, not mayor, they weren't mayors then. He was the first mayor. And then one of these brothers went to Texas, and now there's a Jermyn, Texas. It's the only other town in the United States named Jermyn, same spelling. But they were all pretty wealthy in their own ways, with different interests that of course they used his money, they inherited his money, and they all became pretty financially solid over the course of the years. But then I read later on how they squandered all their money, and not all of them, but some of them. And for information for anybody who's interested, the great-great-grandson of John Jermyn is coming here on the 5th and 6th of April to visit our museum and to bring us some memorabilia from the family. And they're going to meet us at Longworth's for dinner, so they'll be coming up here on the 5th and 6th. If anybody would like to meet them, they'll probably be coming over to our building. Just come over on the 5th and 6th and you'll probably see them. But this is a big article that was in the Scranton Times. I have a copy of this. I believe I have it right there, folded out, so you can read that. And I think, let's see if there's any more pictures. I don't know if that might have been the last one. Oh no, that's Chet Scrupa's bar up on the 700 block I ran around at the last minute and made a couple more pictures, but this was Scrupa's Bar on 700 block on the left-hand side, going right across from the car wash. Kay's Pizza was just the next door. This was Scrupa's. Kay's Pizza was next door. Kay's was next door. No, Kay's is right next door. The White House is still there. Next one. This is Helen's. This is Helen's bar. It's Zaleski's bar. This is where Reachak lives now. This is Jimmy Steele's candy store that was in that first picture next to Oddfellows Hall. That is still standing. That was back in the 1800s. It's still there. Helen's
That was
bar.
a barber shop too, Zaleski's brother-in-law.
This was Smolacombe Sports Cards and the Coggins Barber Shop was on the other side back in the time when I had it. I was only there about a year and a half. But that little building was Jimmy Steele's candy store in the 1800s. And it had a nice metal fence around it.
It looks the same.
This, I believe, was Deke's bar, but I'm not sure. I'm not positive, 100% positive where Deke's, this was Red's. When I was a kid, it was Red's candy store, cigarette store. We used to go there and buy two cigarettes for a nickel. We used to two cigarettes for a nickel over there. But that was Red's store, but I think it was Deke's. I'm not sure 100%, but Deke's had a bar and hotel in East Jermyn, and I think that's where it was.
It was Galashevsky's.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, Galashevsky's had it when I was a kid, but it was Deke's, I think it was Deke's back in the 1800s. So, we'll go to the next one.
Johnny Pizza.
Next one.
One.
This is one of the halls that's still there. St. Michael's doesn't own it anymore, but this is what's left of the halls in Jermyn. We used to play basketball in there back in the day, and now we don't know what the fate of it is now. Somebody bought it, and they're trying to get permits to do something with it. So, but that's St. Michael's Hall. I think this is Cooch's Bar in East Jermyn, but I'm not 100%. That's actually in Archibald, but that was Cooch's Bar, and they had a hall. It was also Cooch's Hall.
That's Brian Phoenix.
So I don't have that, but that's in Archibald as well. That was Cooch's Bar, Dennis Cooch's mother and father. And this is the parking lot across from Butler's. And this is where I believe in this picture it shows McDermott's owning the property. And I'm not sure if McDermott's original bar, that was the picture that we've seen of McDermott's bar, was here. But I believe it was, and it was owned by a man named Timlin in the 1800s before McDermott family bought it. And then I think they moved across the street. That could have been another fire, we don't know. But I'm pretty sure that McDermott's was on the opposite side of the street of where it is now.
Sheila would know.
Railroad owns that now.
The railroad owns it, yeah. There was no railroad there back then.
No.
Back then, the gravity railroad, if you look at this map, the gravity railroad that carried the coal over the mountain to the Lackawaxen River in Honesdale was the only railroad in 1873. The O&W and the D&H weren't here yet. So they didn't, this map is an 1873 map, and you can find all the houses. There was right around 200 houses in Jermyn back then. Now there's 900. So there's a big difference between then and now. The heyday of Jermyn was the late 1800s, early 1900s, when there was over 4,000 people in Jermyn. This is what Butler's looks like now on the opposite side of the street from where it was. And this is over 100 years old. Butler's bar is over 100 years old, not the building. This could have been built later, but the original building, we believe, was on the opposite side of the street. And I think that might be the end. Oh, this is where the Artesian Fire Company was. They also had a bar and the Artesian Hose Company. The next one. And that's the new Artesian, and there is a bar and the Artesian Hose Company. We go to the next one. This is to show you where the hall was from the Catholic Church. The Catholic Church hall sat right back here. behind Mary Golden's house. In the alley, if you went in the alleyway, on top of the land right behind her house is where the first Catholic church was in Jermyn. That was moved from Archibald. And then it became the Catholic Hall. And then it burnt down again, like everything else. All right, so the next one. And this was, like I said, this was Gibson's estate. So this would have been Gibson's. It was Gebhardt's house. Gebhardt was the guy that ran the powder mills, but that was a big fancy house at that time. It's pretty much still nice. That's the old Crystal Fire Company, which had a bar, and it was also the original borough building. This was the first borough building in Jermyn before the one that we knew on Main Street. But I remember it with a ramp coming up from the road to here, and the trucks were right in here. This was not there. It was just one straight building, and the trucks sat in the front. We have pictures of that when it had horses and hose carts back in the 1800s. So we do have pictures of that back in the 1800s. And then the next one should be the new Crystal Fire Company. That was this afternoon. As they were backing in, that has a bar. Okay, so that's all the pictures. Now let me just go over what we have here to make sure we didn't miss anything, because I have a list of some other things that are here. We have the Forest House, Messitz Hotel, the Jermyn House, which was another hotel, Valley House, which was down by Kennedy's. We have Pash's Hotel in East Jermyn. So I don't know if that's the same Pash family that's living there now, but I imagine it is. 1909 was Pash's Hotel. 1800s, McDermott's had a hotel and bar. Rushnock's Hotel in 1915 burnt down. That was over in East Jermyn on A Street, which is Delaware. The Edwards Hotel, which we had on Main Street, Mr. Meehan's. Zaleski's was Thomas Wasley Hotel. I do know that there's some people that are going to watch this video that have texted me on Facebook. They want to know a little bit more about their relative's hotel, which was the Wasley Hotel. So where Helen's Cafe was, where Reachacks lived, where Zaleski's bar was, back then was Wasley's Hotel. We have a picture of it as Wasley's Hotel. I didn't get a picture of that on there, but it was Thomas Wasley's Hotel, and that was early on in the early days. There was also a hotel called the Central House in 1894 in Jermyn. Andy Gavin's we talked about. Thomas Sankey in 1909 had a hotel on Main Street. William Dunn had a hotel on Main Street. J.F. Muldoon had a hotel on Main Street. Edward Deek had a hotel in East Jermyn on A Street. Pash's was on A Street. Michael Raciniak had a hotel on A Street. John Powers had a hotel on A Street. That's all in Delaware. Martin Murphy had a hotel on B Street. And William McDermott had his on A Street. Thomas Kennedy had one on Main Street. Richard Wieldlich, Weidlich, had a hotel on Main Street. John Klamavich Klamovich had a hotel on B Street, which is Hudson. Alex Myshak had a hotel on A Street, which was Delaware. Zielinski's was on Main Street, Zielinski's. James Timlin, where Bottler's is. John S. Jones, which had the Sweeney Hotel. Mrs. Pritchard had a hotel. James Staples had a hotel. James McLaughlin owned Sweeney's Hotel. Peter Ditmore had a hotel. And there was also one called the Russian Hotel, which burned in 1897. That gives us a total of 32 hotels in Jermyn. 32 hotels in Jermyn. Now we have one. The Windsor. Still a hotel. Now the halls in Jermyn, we had Carpenter's Hall, which was in the Windsor. Rushbrook Hall, which was in the Sweeney Hotel. Assembly Hall twice, which we talked about, Enterprise Hall, which was S.D. Davis building, Reimers Hall, which we showed John Gibson Street, which was Joni Hunter's house. Oddfellows Hall on the corner of Rushbrook and Main, which burnt down, which we showed you a picture of. Hendricks Hall, and I believe that was on Rushbrook Street behind the Windsor, up the road from the Windsor, Hendricks Hall, because there was a Hendricks livery stable there. Kimbeck's Hall on Main Street, which was next to Cooch's. St. Michael's Hall, which still stands. Cooch's Hall in their building over by the bar. Davis Hall, which is the Masonic Hall now. There was one called Watts, W-A-T-T-S. We have no idea where it was. We just have it listed on a register in the paper in hotels in Jermyn. And it listed all the hotels that were in Jermyn at that time. And Watts Hall is one of them. So we have to find that. Colley's Hall, which is where Kevin Toolin lives now. Burke's Hall. We don't know where it was. 1902 it was in Jermyn. We have to find the rest of that one. William McKinley's Club Room, 1894. I don't know where that one is. We have to find that one. That was a meeting hall. Gilmore Hall. I've heard a lot about Gilmore Hall and a lot of different articles that mention Gilmore Hall, but we can't find out where it is yet. It just says Main Street. Stubbs Hall was opposite St. George Hotel. So Stubbs Hall would have been directly across from the landscape place of the Tucci's, which is where their house is now. That was called Stubbs Hall back in the 1800s. St. George had a hall, a banquet hall, and a reception hall. There was another one called Gardner's Hall, Russian Hall, which was not the St. Michael's Hall, but a Russian hall, which burnt in 1897. Of course, we had halls in all of the churches. This is a hall. St. James has a hall. The Catholic Church has a hall. The Baptist Church had a hall. The Artesian Fire Company has a hall. And that is all the halls that I can come up with. And the bars we got almost every one of them, except for that Peter Ditmore's hotel was called the Installment House. Never heard that before, but it's the Installment House, which was on Main Street, and I believe it was in the 700 block of Main Street. And McCookie's was where Chet Stroop was, McCookie's. So that's pretty much a list of everything we have. Does anybody have any questions or anything to add that we missed?
I have a question. If you only have 200 houses that have people living out, who is frequenting all this stuff?
That was from the time of the town to now, all these hotels. But when this town was a booming mining town in the late 1800s to early 1920s and 30s, before the mines started to break up, John Jermyn pulled out his very first contract that John Jermyn signed for coal was for 1 million tons of coal. He did it in 1 year. The first year he had the mine, John Gibson couldn't make the mines work. The mines were run down and abandoned when John Jermyn came here. He took 1 million tons out the first year of his contract. So you imagine how many workers had to be here to extract 1 million tons with hand tools, mules, coal cars without engines that they pulled out of the mines on these little tracks and put it onto the gravity railroad and took it on the gravity railroad up over the mountain to Carbondale, up over the mountain to Waymart, down to the Lackawaxen, loaded it on barges, hauled it from the barges to the Delaware River, down the Delaware River to another canal that went from there to the Hudson River, and from the Hudson River to New York City. And we got to remember that the gravity railroad was started built in 1825. So you're talking early 1800s, and Jermyn played a major part in that because Captain Daniel Bacon, who was the second settler, there were 3 people originally in Jermyn with farms. Christopher E. Wilbur owned 330 acres in what was then Carbondale Township, but it was Jermyn. Now, Jermyn was part of Blakely Township and Carbondale Township. Blakely Township was from roughly halfway the last block of Main Street before Rushbrook Street down to the end of town was Blakely Township. From that point north to Mayfield and Carbondale Township was Carbondale Township. So Christopher E. Wilbur owned 330 odd acres of land from the river to the mountain. Captain Daniel Bacon owned 334 acres, I believe, from the river to the mountain on where Bacon Street is. It was named after his mother's house was on the top of the hill, right on the corner, across from S.D. Davis's house. That was Bacon's house. They have outbuildings that they had for some of the people to live in at work. Excuse me. They had 10 wagons of workers with 10 wagons with 2 horses pulling the wagons, taking all of the lumber that he had he built 2 sawmills, one right behind the St. James Church in the river, and one down by the powder mills in the river. One was called the Keystone, and I can't remember the other one off the top of my head, but there were 2 sawmills. He cut all the trees in this area, took them to the sawmill, and then hauled all the lumber to build the gravity railroad. So Jermyn played a big part in building the gravity railroad. They also had the iron furnaces in Scranton where they made the rails for the gravity railroad. They had to come all the way up this plank road to build the rails for the gravity railroad. So you figure 1825, by hand, all this work that was being done with hammers and pegs to build buildings. They didn't have chainsaws, they didn't have any of that stuff. Everything was built with 2-man saws, buck saws, wooden mallets and pegs to build the houses. And they built all of this industry that got this country going where it was, to the point where it was. The coal was the biggest thing that fired all the furnaces. I mean, the blacksmiths used it. Every blacksmith used coal in their furnaces. And then all of the heating, everybody's house in this area was heated by coal. And it all came out of these mines, and that Jermyn helped put the country on the map. I mean, Scranton had a big part in it, Carbondale did, but Jermyn had over 4,000 people at one time, double the population that we have now. So you can think about, like now we have 900 and some houses and 2,000 people. Back then, there were more people in hotels probably than there are living in houses here now. All those hotels had people filled them.
How about the homes? I remember my grandmother saying the miners, they would rent out rooms to the miners.
Yes.
And it helped the widows who lost miner husbands.
I talked to somebody about the Hotel Windsor, and it might have even been Dick, and I don't know if he can remember it or not, but I think he told me that the miners would work shifts, different shifts, and one miner would go to work in the morning, and the other miner would sleep in that room, and then when he'd come home from working in the mines, he would take the bed, and the other miner would go to work in the mines. So there were sometimes 2 people living in the same room working in the mines. So it was not an easy life by any means. So there was a lot going on in Jermyn.
Just to say, in the winter when we took over in '76, there was 13 rooms on that second floor. There was only 1 bathroom.
1 bathroom, 13 rooms, 1 bathroom in the Windsor at the time. That was in 1977. 1 bathroom, 13 rooms. Now you figure the Windsor had another floor on top of that.
I'm sure there was only 1 bathroom.
So I'm sure there was 1 bathroom up there, 13 more rooms. So that was 26 rooms, which would take 2 people. So you figure 52 people lived in the hotel working in the mine. Just 52 people at one time in 1 hotel. So you got the St. George, the Sweeney's Hotel, the Messett's Hotel. You had all these different hotels, and that's where the miners lived. Now, if you look at the map, you'll see the east side on Delaware Street, which is A Street. That's where the first homes were built. The first mine was sunk in 1857. The first breaker was built in 1860. So all of these homes, this is an 1870 map, and all these homes that are down here on A Street and B Street, which is Delaware and Hudson, that was the very first homes that were built for the miners. So we do have Mullally's house, which is next to the Catholic Church. That is the oldest house in Jermyn, lived in and owned by the same family. That is the oldest house owned by the same family and lived in by the same family. It's not the oldest house, but it is, so that we do have a connection there to the Mullally's that are here. The school, Dulce Dunham, is still here. That was here in 1870 as our first meeting room, schoolhouse, meeting hall, message hall, and the first elections were held. That was in 1870. So we know that house, which is on this map, was here. So all of the famous people we talked about, you'll find a lot of their names here and a lot of the things. Now I think maybe now that we've gotten a good crowd of people who want to learn about history of Jermyn, maybe we'll do the history of the Rushdale murder in 1867. That might be the next one. I've got a lot of that, and that has connections to the Windsor as well, because the guy that was involved in that murder was drinking in the Windsor Farmers Hotel and then left there, and his exact words are, "I'm going to kill me a Welshman before the night is over." And he ended up dead because the Welshman killed him. So we'll tell that story another time. But does anybody else have any questions or anything? If not, that's pretty much it. It went longer than I wanted to, but I think it was very interesting. Mary?
We have membership applications up on
Over on the table.